My name is Edward Silva, and my presentation will be on Marvel's Civil War in comics and in film. I chose the Civil War comics and their film adaptation to explore why the film is weaker as a story, as well as some of the reasons it fell short of the source material. Civil War is a crossover story including many different Marvel heroes and villains. The series was written by Mark Millar and penciled by Steve McNiven. Other tie-in books were also created, but I'll be focusing on the 7-issue limited series that comprises the main storyline. The Civil War series begins with The Disaster, a reality TV series that follows a group of heroes as they fight villains raids a house that, unbeknownst to them, is helping to hide the supervillain Nitro. Nitro sets off an explosion that kills over 800, and the tragedy is used to justify the forced licensing of all with powers. Two groups of heroes form on either side of the new law, one side led by Iron Man and the other led by Captain America. Iron Man thinks that the superhuman community needs to be better trained and held accountable. Captain America feels that arresting people who don't comply with the new law is unfair to those who risk their lives saving people. When he refuses to cooperate, he's forced to flee. The film adaptation was set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and was part of the Captain America film series. The film was produced by Marvel Studios and distributed by Walt Disney Studio Motion Pictures. It was directed by Anthony and Joe Russo and stars Chris Evans as Captain America and Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. The film had a gross budget of $250 million and earned $1.53 billion globally. The film begins with a flashback that shows the Winter Soldier being activated for a mission in a secret Hydra bunker. On his mission, he wrecks an approaching car and steals IV bags out of the trunk. The next scene shown is Captain America and a team attempting to stop villains in a high-population area. They succeed, but damage and casualties are high. The high casualty incident, along with others in the past, are used as justification to promote an international law that would place the Avenger team under the purview of a UN panel, and would not be able to operate without that panel's approval. The original comic series and the film adaptation share some similarities, most notably at the start of each, with the disaster sparking government to take action, Captain America and Iron Man not sharing the same views on the new laws, and the two splitting to form like-minded groups to operate with a similar cause. While there are a few more similarities, they are inconsequential compared to the differences in the story that completely change the scope and magnitude of the film adaptation. With scope, we see way more heroes and villains involved in the comic series than there are in the film. The much deeper pool of characters took the comic storyline where most great stories find themselves, exploring the human experience in relevant and meaningful ways. The addition of the Fantastic Four allowed readers to see interpersonal struggle, while the full cast of villains showed readers the dangers of taking absolute stances with no alternatives. The extensive lineup allowed for multiple perspectives on very controversial issues to be both correct and incorrect. The film adaptation suffers from the concessions made to the story to fit the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Instead of a cast of villains, audiences got only one, with some nameless goons peppered in. This took the story from being about a true struggle of perspective and circumstance to the generic evil villain trying to derail the heroes. Disney, now having ownership over Marvel, will of course have had heavy influence in the creative direction of the film, and the omission of critical plot points is glaring. The most obvious is the absence of substantial death. In the comics, Tony Stark, Hank Pym, and Reed Richards create a cybernetic clone of Thor, who then outright kills Goliath. Goliath's death, as well as many named villains, were swept under the rug. While researching scholarly articles for use in my paper, I found multiple comparisons drawn between the original Civil War series and America's 9/11. The general idea of these works was that a catastrophe was used to justify the relinquishment of our own freedom in favor of the promise of safety played against our fears. The worst difficulty I've had so far with my paper and presentation started with coming up with something to write. I always feel that while a fully open prompt is truly great and a boon for creativity, I always find myself wishing there was more direction. The experience has been great though, since it forced me to improve and grow. I'd like to now ask my audience if there has ever been a time when your convictions or morals made you take a stand, even when no one else agreed, or your beliefs were contrary to the law. Thank you all for your time. It's been great.